Hello, my friends. The Russians continue to break through and advance further, capturing new villages. The problem is that despite their announced aid packages, not all the weapons have arrived in Ukraine, including the F-16. Therefore, it's extremely difficult for the Ukrainian forces to hold the defense. Zelensky also said that not everything depends on us and that a lot depends on our partners.
Чи достатньо нам допомагають? Достатньо для чого? Достатньо для перемоги? Недостатньо. Ми перемогли би. І втрат би було менше. Недостатньо. Достатньо триматись? Так. На сьогодні, вважаю, так. І тому, коли ми кажемо, а що Україна, а як ви бачите? Як ми бачимо? Ну, ми-то знаємо, як ми бачимо, але не все від нас залежить. Ми будемо бачити закінчення війни так, як повинно бути справедливим. А тут залежить не тільки від нас. Ця справедливість, бачите, вона тримається не тільки на людях і на нашому бажанні, а ще на фінансах, на зброї, на політичній підтримці, на єдності в ЄС, в НАТО, в світі.
That's why many people think the general staff is doing something wrong, like not destroying the Crimean bridge and so on. It turns out there simply isn't permission for that. And so not everything depends on Ukraine, and the war isn't going the way we would like. As sad as it sounds, the worst part is not this. The worst part is that after Trump comes into power, support for Ukraine may abruptly stop. Today it was reported that Trump has chosen Senator J.D. Vance as his vice presidential candidate. This candidate has called for an end to US budgetary aid to Ukraine and demanded the recognition of its territorial concessions to Russia. He also tried to block the allocation of $60 billion in aid in April. So, what do you think about this news? This suggests that if Trump is choosing such people, he himself holds the opinion that support for Ukraine should be stopped and territories should be given to Russia. And what awaits Ukraine with Trump's return is hard to even imagine, friends. What do you think about this? You can write in the comments. Now, let's move on to the situation along the front line, and we'll start with the most intense Pokrovsk direction. Here, the Russians continue to expand the front around Ocheretine. Unfortunately, they are succeeding. Despite heavy losses, they are advancing further and are pushing hard towards the highway. Due to their ability to expand their controlled territory near Vozdvizhenka, they are now breaking through closer to the village, worsening their situation there. Consequently, it's becoming clear that sooner or later the village will also have to be abandoned, as the Ukrainian positions are being shattered by shelling, making it extremely difficult to hold the defense for long. Meanwhile, the fighting near Novoalexandrivka continues. Today, after the Russians advanced in the areas of Yevgenivka and Novoselivka Persha, a critical situation developed in the village of Progress. The Russians are assaulting the village, shelling nearby settlements, and trying to push the defense further with a large number of troops. Additionally, the fighting near Yasnobrodivka hasn't ceased. Here, too, the Russians are attempting to push the Ukrainian forces from their positions in the fields to reach their water barrier. The Russians also continue their attacks on Karlivka, but they haven't achieved any new successes there. In the Toretsk direction. The situation is critical. The Russians are successfully encircling Toretsk and other settlements. Yesterday, they managed to advance 3.5 kilometers towards Delivka. The assaults in the area of this village haven't stopped. The Russians also continue street fighting in Pivdenne, Pivnichne, and Zalizne, and are heavily shelling the entire territory. Furthermore, the Russians are using a large number of FPV drones, making the fight for every meter of land extremely costly. In the direction of Chasiv Yar, the Russians are maintaining the activity. Their advance here is less significant than in the Pokrovsk direction, with only 400 meters gained near Andriivka. However, the fighting continues, and the Ukrainian forces report that the Russians are still breaking through the canal microdistrict and constantly need to be driven back. Overall, the battle continues, but there are still many Russian troops and the assaults don't cease. The Ukrainian forces report that since the Russians are destroying all strong points, there is nothing left to hold on to. In the Siversk direction, the Russians continue to assault Bilohorivka to finally capture the settlement, which has been contested for over a year. Here, as before, the situation remains unchanged. The fighting also continues near Spirne, Vyimka, and Rusdolivka. No changes have been recorded in this area over the past day. In the Crimea direction, the Russians have decreased their activity and are currently regrouping, continuing only to shell Liman and the forest near Crimea. Unfortunately, there are casualties in Liman due to two airstrikes with 250-kilogram bombs. In the Svatove area, the assaults on Stelmachivka continue, but there are no changes. Further south, there are ongoing battles for Makivka and Rekivka. Over the past day, there have been about 10 assaults, but the Ukrainian forces have managed to repel the attacks. In the Kupiansk direction, the Russians have concentrated all their forces on capturing Pishane to advance towards the water barrier. They are conducting heavy shelling of the village and immediately attempting to storm it, but there are no reports of advancements so far. The front line has remained unchanged over the past day. In the Kharkiv direction, battles are raging for Gleboke. Despite the Ukrainian forces claiming successful counterattacks, they still haven't managed to push the Russians out of the entire village. Half of the village remains under Russian control. Meanwhile, the Russians continue to mobilize reserves to try to break the deadlock and make further advances. However, their grouping has suffered significant damage, and according to the latest reports, they are shifting reserves from the Kherson direction to the Kharkiv direction. In the area near Vovchansk, fighting continues unabated, and like before, the front line remains unchanged. Ukrainian forces are also conducting counterattacks, but significant success haven't been achieved yet. They haven't managed to push the Russians out completely from the outskirts of the city. In the Kurakhove direction, the Russians have managed to advance further into Krasnohorivka's northern part. Their advance here amounted to 400 meters, and the fighting hasn't ceased. After reaching the water barrier near Georgievka, the situation for the village has worsened. Russians continue to shell the village and periodically launch assaults. Further south, battles are ongoing for Paraskoviivka and the village of Kostantinivka, but there have been no changes reported so far. In the direction of Vuhledar, the Russians have been successful in reclaiming territory that the Ukrainian forces had liberated during the counteroffensive. They have taken Urozhaine and Staromayorsk, and now Makarivka is under threat again. Periodic assaults on the village are occurring, and Russians are attempting to advance towards Velika Novosilka across the fields, shelling the populated areas. Therefore, there is no good news from this area either at the moment. In the Zaporizhia direction, the activity has slightly decreased, and the Russians are currently regrouping with continuing artillery bombardments along the front line. Meanwhile, in the direction of Kherson, the Russians continue periodic attacks on the village of Krinky, and shelling along the right bank persist, though there have been no changes so far. It remains to be seen how the situation will unfold after some Russian reserves are shifted from here to the Kharkiv direction. We are waiting to see how events will develop further. Meanwhile, Russians continue to discuss their plans for nuclear strikes.
Несложно предположить географию ответа в случае, если короткий пресс-релиз Белого дома станет реальностью. Под угрозой без малого все европейские столицы, если наши ракеты встанут в Калининграде, Берлин, Варшава, все Прибалты, Париж, Бухарест, Прага. Конечно, американские базы в Германии, Гармии Шпартенкирхен, казармы Патча, Шпангдалем, Рамштайн. Особое внимание Британии, нашему традиционному врагу, так как против нее будет работать значительная часть Северного флота. Под удар Вашингтон ставит не только Лондон, но и Манчестер, Бирмингем, крупнейшую военно-морскую базу Девонпорт, Клайд в Шотландии, где король хранит ядерные ракеты «Трайдент», Портсмут и Чатамскую верфь в графстве Кент. Британия в самом уязвимом положении. В принципе, достаточно 3 ракет, и эта цивилизация рухнет.
Will collapse. Okay. Overall, intimidation continues. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.